1. So this story takes place in the mid-2000s, when I was at secondary school, which is basically high school for you Yankee Doodle dandies. I was 13 and going through that awkward stage in life where everything is changing in you constantly. One thing that was changing was the amount of gas my body created after a particularly long series of curries and chilies that my family made on the regular, as they were cheap meals to cook and easy. Plus, despite being as English as Paddington Bear, we loved spicy food. So the story takes place over a series of French classes in which I had a showdown with this very petty French teacher, Mrs. F. She regularly put kids in detention over everything, and while some was justified, like talking in class and not doing homework, for me she decided that despite the fact that I was a half-decent student who was courteous and polite, because I would occasionally fart in class, that was enough to put me in detention if someone smelt it and made a fuss. I tried everything to stay away from this woman's wrath, like staying at the back of the class by a nearby open window, to asking my parents if I could have something that was less likely to bring me flatulence. This all came to a head when I was regularly being given detention despite no obvious discipline issues. The school was not obligated to tell parents why I received detention, and the teacher didn't want to share, I think. For a while I kept it hidden as both my parents worked until I got home anyways, and generally I was thinking that they couldn't do anything about it. This was until I was put into after-school detention on my 14th birthday. Now, my parents always made a fuss about my birthdays, as it was close to Christmas, and they knew that I liked a day where I could pick anything for dinner and anything to do all night long. Now, this detention was scheduled to last for 2 hours, so there was no way I was getting home before Mum and Dad, and they were pissed when they found out that for nearly 2 months straight, I had been losing break times, lunch times, and hours of my home life to this woman's insanity in her efforts to get me to stop farting. Now, my dad was home after my mum every day, and he asked my brother where my mum and me were, as my mother had come to get me after calling the school to find out I was in after-school detention. She was, after all, planned to be ready to take us out for a paid reservation in an Italian restaurant, as my favorite food is and always has been lasagna. So while Dad is frantically trying to get the reservation changed to no avail, Mum is collecting me. When she finds out that Dad failed to get the money back on the reservation or the time changed, she wasn't happy, but she was pissed when she found out everything about why I was in detention and how much time I'd spent in it. Bear in mind that until this point, I had disguised my after-school detentions as doing extra work for school projects, so I was regularly just given bus money and told it's fine. Now this time, I thought I'd try getting my French teacher to be nice, as it's my birthday, but no chance. So the following day after my birthday, my mum took the day off work, and I was called into the school office to have a sit-down with my French teacher and the headmistress. My mum let me say my piece first, and I said I was trying not to disturb anyone, but sometimes it just happens. I made sure to be as innocent as possible. The headmistress asked Mrs. F what compelled her to think that flatulence in class was worth so much punishment.
Because he needs to learn to control himself.
My mum then went on about how much money the family spent getting me home from school, because I couldn't take the 3 o'clock bus that my bus pass covered, and they had to spend close to £15 a week getting me home. She then added the cost of her workday that she had to take off and the reservation they lost on my birthday. She then did something I didn't see coming. She pulled out a pile of bus tickets and receipts along with a pay stub from work to demonstrate the cost she was having to expend, going, so is the school paying me for all this because I'm holding both responsible for the cost. In total, between the bus tickets and the lost reservation, the pay for the day, it was about £250. Mrs. F then goes,
I'll discipline your child until he learns that he will not disturb the class with his disgusting body.
I shrunk at this statement, just a little bit. Then my headmistress says something I'll never forget. Don't worry about the costs. Mrs. F will be paying them in full out of her pocket before you leave today, if she wants to keep her job. As I can see your point that your child is not being a bad kid, just a little bit gassy. Mrs. F, if you wish to put a child in detention from now on, I'll be reviewing it before approving the detention, as it is clear that you are abusing your power as a teacher. Now pay this lady her money and get back to work. With that, Mrs. F was fuming and agreed to pay my mother out of her paycheck. The school office handed the money over to my mother, who proceeded to spend it on extra Christmas presents for me and my older brother that year. Oh, and how did my mum finish up her petty revenge? She told me to sit in front of Mrs. F's desk and loaded me regularly on anything that will let me guff, which I did, with her never being able to punish me again. 2. This was a hot minute ago, mid to late 90s. I was working evenings slinging coffee at a well-known international coffee chain. You know the one. While I finished my degree. The coffee chain had just introduced a brand new blended frozen beverage that made all the baristas' lives a living hell. I still can't drink the shit to this day, but it was pretty popular, especially with younger patrons. As my location was right next to the only mall in the area, we were inundated with teenagers pretty regularly. Most were respectful and nice, except this one group of girls. They were there nearly every evening, not tipping, being loud and obnoxious as fuck, making and leaving messes everywhere. We all despised them. When the new blended frozen drinks come out, the group of teenage succubi found a new, improved way to make our lives difficult. They would descend upon our location en masse, even bringing new nasty girls with them. They'd all order the blended frozen drink, but each order would be just a little bit different. This would ensure that we would have to make one drink at a time in the one blender we had. The little slogs would even lean over the counter and monitor us to make sure every one of their drinks were exactly made to specification, and to ensure we didn't screw it up. The girls also had picked up the lovely new habit of staying past closing. Rules of this coffee chain at that time were that we couldn't ask anyone to leave after we closed. We could start cleaning duties, even turning some lights off here and there, but we couldn't be like, "Hey, we're closing. Can you take your beverage outside?" Dumb rule, but most people would see us shutting down and head for the door. Now, the succubus brigade, oh no, their leader confronted one of my co-workers one night as he swept and mopped near them, roughly 15 minutes past closing.
"You can't ask us to leave. My aunt is a manager at another chain, so I know."
Dude hadn't even acknowledged them. This wasn't an everyday occurrence, but believe me when I say it, we were done. About 2 or so weeks after they had confronted my coworker, I was closing. Had one other person with me, and I had volunteered to close the front of the store. The mean girls were camped out in their usual corner. I started wiping down tables. I heard giggling and looked in their direction. They had knocked a piece of coffee cake on the floor. Crumbs were everywhere. Not only this, but they were all looking at me and smirking. And the ringleader shrugged and said, "Oops." I was fucking done. I finished wiping down the tables while I formulated my plan. I ducked behind the counter and motioned for my coworker to join me in the back. I told her my plan, grabbed a mop, and moved back behind the counter near the flavored syrups. I poured a nice amount of raspberry syrup into my mouth and headed back in the general vicinity of the flock of biznatches. After a few moments of totally inconspicuous mopping, I lurched toward the girls clutching my abdomen with a terrified look on my face. This is quite successful in diverting their attention toward me, exactly what I want. After I make a few more puke-like lurches, I spew forth the raspberry syrup all over the floor. It went everywhere, and looked like I had vomited blood. To say that they freaked out would be an understatement. A collective high-pitched screech noise rose up from the group as they grabbed their purses and scrambled for the door. Drinks were spilled. One girl tripped and fell. Chairs were knocked over. It surpassed my highest expectations. It was glorious. They were still screaming around the parking lot and crying as I calmly walked to the door and locked it, with my coworker laughing hysterically in the background. We started clearing up the absolute worthwhile mess, still falling out as they silently watched for a few moments before piling into 3 cars and leaving. Never heard anything from management, never got written up, never saw those girls again. Will forever be remembered as the single greatest event in my retail career. 3. I am a mariner. My position on the ship is mate. Below me are my deckhands who are responsible for the labor work like painting, grinding, maintenance, line handling, cargo ops, etc. Above me is the chief mate, second in command, and the captain, in charge of everyone and the responsible individual for the entire ship. We're officers, and we do the planning for navigation, ship handling, training, payroll, etc. I work for a private company that pays me a day rate, which is a 12-hour workday. I work 1 month on and 1 month off. Like most industries, we're undermanned, can't hire enough to fill all positions. Now, this ship I work is even harder to crew up, mainly because of the captain. He's got a notorious reputation for being a jerk, so people find all sorts of ways not to come to his boat. And if they do, they only work 1 tour and never come back. I joined this ship back in May, and for the last 7 months, it's been kinda hell working for this captain. He's a narcissist, condescends everyone, insults everyone, works us like slaves, never thanks us, just an all-round class act. You know, these types of bosses, they never let up, they push you to the limit, and just make you hate work and life. With that said, I've been working 15, sometimes 18 hours a day, because we're short-handed. I'm doing all sorts of work that's not in my job description. I had to do cargo ops, handle mooring lines maintenance, all in addition to my mate duties. I'm a very hard worker, a team player, and never say no to work. The thing is, we don't get paid for any more than 12 hours of work a day, so all those extra hours I worked are unpaid. It burns me and I freaking hate it, but like I said, I'm a team player. I want to make sure it's safe for my guys, the operations got completed, and clients stay happy, so I do what is asked of me. I am also the cook. We don't have an official cook on board, because this is considered a small crew and small ship. I was cooking lunch every day for my crew and many dinners too. Generally, you're on your own for breakfast and dinner. I was so good at my job that he and the chief mate passed their duties on to me, so they can sit back and relax. Chief mates and captains have a lot of paperwork to do, but I was handling that for them too up until this point. Well, one day I'm just completely burnt out. With these 15 to 18-hour days, I get into a discussion about how the captain and company is stealing my wages because I'm working more than 12 hours a day. I tell him if I could show up to watch an hour later than my scheduled duty. The engine department does this when they require their folks to work overtime the day before. I work a swing shift, which overlaps both the captain and the chief mate, so it's not unheard of or uncommon to let guys show up late, especially if they worked more than 12 hours the previous day. Well, once I asked to sleep in an extra hour. All hell broke loose with him, insulting me, calling me names, being racist. Nobody wants to work anymore, blah blah blah, just nasty inappropriate behavior that shouldn't happen but happens all the time in this industry. He then finishes the verbal beatdown with a cocky-eating grin. You know, mate, you never had to work overtime. You should have just said no. I was steaming at this point, but I just replied with, okay, roger that. I called it a day and went to bed. Cue malicious compliance. The next day I'm already on watch, and he comes on to work and asks me what's for lunch. Nothing, I'm not cooking today. Did you pull out anything from the freezer last night? Nope. So nobody had any real food for lunch. They all made sandwiches and ate chips instead. Later that day, hey, I need you to go finish painting the rescue boat. The guys are busy with other projects, and they want this done today. Well, Cap, since it's not in my job description, I respectfully decline. We get into a little arguing, but he concedes. The very next day he pulls the same thing. What's for lunch? Nothing. What do we have that we can cook real fast? I don't know, Cap. I didn't check. Cooking isn't my job, remember, so I don't plan on doing it. He rushes to cook some whole chickens in an hour, and they come out raw and really ticked off the crew. Nobody touched his food. This routine lasted a whole week until it was the end of my tour and I got to go home. I returned to duty a month later, and he thought I would forget it or let it slide. I indeed did not forget it or let it slide. For the next entire month-long tour, the captain had to do the cooking because the chief mate and I refused to do it, and he complained because he had to wake up early and prep food. I was already doing all that when I was cooking, I just didn't complain. I enjoy cooking. But I was willing to die on this hill, I wasn't letting it go. I refused to let him win this battle. I did not cook one meal. To be petty, I made myself delicious food, did not share it. I refused any work that wasn't in my job description. What was he going to do, write me up on disciplinary for not doing someone else's job that isn't mine, or for not working past 12 hours? Not happening. Understand at this point, I was physically tired, burnt out, and mentally drained from doing everybody's job and taking crap from him. I asked for a transfer to another ship, but got denied, so I'm still stuck in his ship with this captain. But now he knows where I stand, and I haven't cooked or did extra duties since. And that's what you get for taking advantage of a good worker and insulting me. I almost forgot to add that one of the reasons I'm not getting a transfer is because nobody is easily willing to come here and work for this guy. One day during that hitch, I came up to the bridge and overheard him talking to the assignment manager about keeping me here permanently because he's a good mate. He's probably military and he can cook, blah blah blah. I was supposed to be a floater, filling in positions on different boats as needed, which is what I like. We do cargo operations that involve rigging cables to cargo on our deck for offload and unload. It can be very dangerous at times. This evolution requires at least 2 people, and because office management sucks at manning, sometimes we don't have 2 people to do it. I care about the safety of my guys and girls. I would never leave them hanging like that, and that's why I'll go down on deck and help. I've been in that situation many times and it sucks. I do it for my guys, not for the captain or the company. It doesn't make it fair or enjoyable, but I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if one of my guys got injured or killed because I let them work alone. The other things like cooking, captain's paperwork, maintenance, engineering, I continue to refuse those duties. 4. This happened yesterday at GameStop. I pulled up looking for a new headset as mine had finally bit the dust, and as I walk up to the store I see one employee inside alone, just watching something on his phone. I go to open the door and it's locked. Employee looks at me and points at the sign that seems to have had a toddler write, "Be back at 4 p.m. It was 1:30 in the afternoon. He then proceeds to walk up to the door as I asked why through the glass. He closes the security gate and goes back to his phone. Well, I opened up my phone to see their Wi-Fi is operating and call corporate, requesting a call from their DM to notify them of wage theft and false advertisement. I then leave a Google review and see this has been going on for months. I leave and run other errands and return to the store shortly after 3 and was planning on waiting in my car until 4. I then see someone walking up and ask if they work there, and if so, why aren't they open? His response was, "Yeah, I work here, and no." He then proceeds to lock the door behind him. Well, then that's some shit customer service, I think to myself. As I now decide to wait outside the store to stretch my legs, 3 other individuals approach the store, one after the other, hoping to spend their hard-earned money at this place. The first said he received an email saying his online order was ready to be picked up and was not pleased. He left. The second were 2 men looking to get consoles for their kid's birthday that happened to be the next day. Safe to say they were disappointed. The third individual was the most interesting of all, as he walked up and saw the sign had changed from what he saw this morning. He told me that he showed up at 11, and the sign said be back at noon, and it has since changed to 4. I asked him if the original employee was the same one he saw inside earlier, and he said yes. His reaction to the change was to scream, "Fuck it, I'm going to Walmart." This is where the store crossed the line with me. They called the center security on me, and the guard was a pompous asshole who told me to leave and get away or he would call the cops. When I asked why, he said the store manager complained I was telling people not to shop there and that they weren't open. Which was a lie. I only passed on the knowledge of what I had to people, that they were inside but weren't letting anyone in. Time for real revenge. I had nothing else to do yesterday, so I drove 20 minutes to the next closest GameStop. During the drive, I called corporate back and further added my initial complaint with the updates. When I arrived at the other store, I spoke with their manager and explained the situation I had been through, and he called his DM to report it. He was informed that location did not have an active DM, and I gave my number to them and the RM to contact me on Monday to apologize and get all of my details of what happened. The manager of this location gave me a discount on a headset and recommended I return to his location for future purchases, which I will gladly do since he was very helpful. 5. Last night, driving my beat-up works van home, I had the pleasure of an encounter with Mr. Impatient. Now, Mr. Impatient wasn't being particularly dangerous, just annoying. He came up behind me on a one-way street, flashing his lights, bipping his horn, tailing me on my rear quarter, obviously wanting to pass. From where he was, he had a clear view of the road in front. There were various side roads that joined from left and right, and parked cars on both sides at intervals that made it impossible for him to pass safely, unless I were to pull in. It is a 2-lane road, but the parked cars ensure that only a single line of traffic can travel down it. What you need to know about driving here, SE European country, is that because of a lack of enforcement, many road laws, such as speed limits, parking restrictions, no entry signs, one-way streets, even helmets on motorbikes, are considered mere suggestions, as opposed to mandatory legislation. Also, signage, road markings, and even traffic lights were installed in a minimalist fashion unless on a major highway, which this road wasn't. Anyway, as we approach a traffic light-controlled junction and the parked cars cease, Mr. Impatient passes me on my left, only to be halted at a red light. This junction is a 5-road intersection, with traffic lights on every incoming road. Each incoming road is 2 lanes. I pull up in the right-hand lane with the lights level with Mr. Impatient on my left. Except for the road directly ahead, roads left and right are pretty blind, so you rely on the traffic light to proceed safely. There is only one traffic light at our entrance to the junction, normal red, yellow, green for straight on or left, and an additional filter green arrow for my lane to turning right only. My works van is pretty beat up. It's an old, well-abused Ford Transit from 1995. It is basically a brick with a slightly angled front end and has all the aerodynamic properties of its kiln-fired clay counterpart. And here we are, side by side at the traffic light. I edge forward. Mr. Impatient cannot see the traffic light. Mr. Impatient edges forward so he can see. I edge forward some more, very, very slowly, leaning forward and peering out the window as if I was looking for an address, blocking his view of the light. Mr. Impatient edges forward again, so do I. The traffic light is now level with the back edge of my passenger window. I can still see that it's red, and Mr. Impatient cannot move any further forward without putting himself in danger or obstructing the cars from his left, so he cannot see the traffic light. It's really no big deal. You just sit there until the car next to you goes or the car behind leans on the horn. I was watching. There were no cars behind us. Our lights go green, so I sit there. Mr. Impatient sits there too. His light goes red. My light, because it's a right turn filter lane, remains green. I sit and wait for the cross traffic to start from the right. And when there is a nice flow of traffic, I go. I see Mr. Impatient in my wing mirror, his hands up in a WTF fashion, as he has to sit there for another traffic light cycle. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 214. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Please do poop the like button before you go, it helps me greatly. Okay, let's see. Don't think we have any shoutouts today. I think the next one's Wednesday, so let's just move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, as it's quite cold right now, and I've just seen a snow and ice warning again on the weather app. That's lovely. That's got me thinking about popsicles, or ice lollies as we call them here. There may also be a tub of ice cream calling my name in the freezer. I'll do one more video, then I'll take a break, and I think I'll have the ice cream. It's low calorie, so that's totally allowed by the rules that I made up. What is the weirdest form you've ever found a relatively normal foodstuff in? And the reason I'm talking about frozen treats is because it's possible to buy popsicles in the shape of David Hasselhoff. Hofsicles. Yes, it was a thing. Del Monte made them, of all people. The man from Del Monte was probably going through something when he invented those. Anyway, I'd love to see your answers in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.